Okay, I think we are here. We have Commissioner Gardner on the line. Commissioner Lee is out of state on business and won't be able to participate, so it'll be just two commissioners. We'll still have a majority of the commission body present. Diane, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Yes, I can hear you.
And Adam Beck?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, then I think we're good. Well, then let's get this started. We have today's Board of Equalization meetings. Approval on number one, the minutes of July 29th Board of BOE meeting. Any comments on that, Commissioner Gardner?
No, I have none, and I will move to accept those meeting minutes.
And I can second that, so all in favor say aye.
Aye.
And aye, that passes 2-0. Number two is approve the Board of Equalization Assessor Approved Review Process Report dated August 25th. Any comments on that?
I do not have any.
And I have none either. So we can make a
Okay,
motion.
then I will move to accept that.
Okay, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, so this passes 2-0. Agenda number three, approve Board of Equalization Assessor approved primary residential exemption changes report for August 26, 2001. And this includes 62 properties. I looked through them all and I didn't have questions or nothing stood out. How about you, Commissioner Gardner?
Yeah, same. I didn't see anything that stood out. I didn't have any outstanding questions. So I'm fine to make a motion to approve that.
I'd like to ask staff quickly, was there anything in those 62 properties we might have missed that we should be aware of?
I don't, Jim Stevens, County Assessor. I don't believe anything was missed. Amy was very thorough when she went through that report yesterday to make sure the reasoning behind those changes was
Okay.
what it should be. So
Okay, there was several there. I just want to miss something.
well,
Okay.
and we may have some of them who may have responded to that declaration incorrectly, and they have appeal rights to this decision if they so choose.
Okay, then we have a motion to pass, and I can second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes 2-0. Agenda three. Agenda number four is approve or deny owner's request to reinstate taxable status to primary residential on parcel 52-368-0005 for tax year 2021. As I look at the address, I want to make sure that I understand it. This is a rental that he owns. He occupies a separate home as his primary, so this is a rental property.
Yes, it's been a rental property since they acquired the home in 1999, and it's been managed by MVP Management as a full-time rental throughout that time. This is an example of someone who responded to that declaration, declared that it was non-primary, and then is now trying
Okay.
to reverse
So it's a
that
commercial
decision.
property for them.
What's that?
It's a commercial property to them.
Yeah, it's a rental property,
owner.
yes,
Okay.
full-time.
I just want to make sure I got
Yep.
that right. I have no other questions. Commissioner Gardner?
Yeah, I have no other questions either.
Okay, make a motion.
Yeah, I will make a motion to accept.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
That passes 2-0. Number five, approve or deny assessor's request to change taxable status from primary residential to secondary residential on parcel 43-120-0432 for taxable year 2021. Any comments there?
No, this was we were notified by Twin Falls County that the owner had they established a primary residence in their jurisdiction, and so we sent out letters to verify this occupancy of this home in Saratoga Springs. I sent letters to both Idaho and the Saratoga Springs address with no response, and so we'll move it to secondary upon approval, and then Sally will send them another notification, and they can still appeal this if they so choose.
Okay, so to confirm, their primary residence is in Twin Falls County, Idaho, and they have another property, their secondary property for their personal use in Saratoga Springs. Okay,
Okay. All right, well, I will make a motion to accept.
and I can second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that passes 2-0. Agenda 6, approve or deny adjustment to 2021 taxes on parcel 55-013-0013 in the amount of $692.70 for decrease in fair market value due to access interruption per state code 59-1004.6 due to house fire on April 19th of this year. Looking at the images, the only thing left is the framework or the footings and the walls of the basement, and that's it.
Yep. Yeah, it's total loss, basically.
So it might be a little bit of an access interruption. Is there any contradictions that you see there?
No, this is just pretty much governed by state code. It allows the owner, the improvement has to be at least 30% destroyed. Can't be due to arson or, intentions by the owner. So they appeal or they submit the request, we review it, we get a copy of the fire report, and if it meets the guidelines, then we prorate the adjustment per state code.
I read the summary. So the fire started in the garage. I forgot how it started, but it started in the garage, and because of the wind blew the fire into the house, which consumed the entire home.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And basically, just a quick explanation, they're taxed on the full assessed value of the home up to the date of the fire, and then we determine the amount of loss of the fire and prorate the taxes for the rest of the year.
Okay.
So,
Commissioner Gardner, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions.
Okay, then we can.
So if you don't have any further questions, then I can move to accept.
Okay, I'll second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That passes 2-0.
thank you.
Thank you very much. And last, agenda item 7, approve or deny application for review by Board of Equalization of Farmland Assessment Act status for JMMS Enterprises, serial number 24-003-0063. Could we get a review of what's involved with this?
Commissioner, this is Paul Jones. We might just double check that JMMS is present. I don't know if these
Are they?
gentlemen here. Okay.
We are, sir. How are you?
Please come forward then.
All right.
State your name and who you're representing
I'm Stuart Pay. I represent
at the microphone. Thank you.
Stuart Pay, and I represent JMMS. Can I set up a PowerPoint presentation to walk through these? Is that possible?
Sure. Yeah.
I do. It's on the computer, sir. Oops.
This may not go into the Zoom call.
Okay. Should we have them maybe do it over here?
That's still.
We want to make sure that this could be seen by the public too.
Yeah. We have to do it over here?
You bet.
Yeah. I can advance it for you.
Let's have it pass.
All right. No problem.
I'm not seeing, and I'll let you know if I can see it on Zoom, but I am less than 5 minutes out. So,
Right now, they are setting up the laptop.
okay. Perfect.
How far out are you? Did you say, Commissioner Gardner, about 5 minutes?
Yeah, I would say 5 minutes max.
Okay, then let's take a recess. I don't know if I'd take the motion in a second, but let's take a recess for 10 minutes, get this set up. Okay?
Yeah, you can get that set up and I'll be in the room then. That'll be
Okay,
perfect.
we'll take a recess for 10 minutes, and we'll reconvene about
He's got,
2:22.
he's got a remote there.
Yep, that works.
Pop that out so you can. Okay. If you plug that in.
business. I cannot speak remotely, so.
You're muted.
I didn't mute him.
No, you're muted.
I am now.
No,
Am I-
Never mind, sorry.
We're good.
He's muted, I'm looking at the wrong thing.
I muted.
You're supposed to be muted.
Okay, I think we're back online regardless. So
Yes.
Commissioner Gardner, Commissioner Sackwich are present, Commissioner Lee is out of state on business. And we're addressing now agenda item number 7 on today's Board of Equalization.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, Board members. Ben Stanley with Utah County Attorney's Office. Wanted to give a little bit of background on this particular application and then present some of the county's position, the assessor's office position on this matter, and then we'll hear from the applicant, and then we'll take evidence, if it's acceptable to the board, from the county assessor's analyst and auditor who's been to this property many, many times. But just as a introduction, and maybe I'll even go a step back and talk about 3 different topics. I'd like to talk a little bit about the philosophy of taxation, then talk a little bit about the history of this particular property. It's an application for Greenbelt status under the Farmland Assessment Act, 59-2, Part 5. And that application it's a property that had been in Greenbelt status in the past and then lost its Greenbelt status and is bringing that application back, was denied by the assessor's office and is now seeking a review by the Board of Equalization. Historically, well, let's talk just for a second about the Utah State Constitution. There's a clause in our Constitution that talks about equal and uniform taxation. And so our policy and our goal across our tax system is to have equal and uniform taxation. And so when we have abatements and privileged tax, preferential tax treatment to various properties, that's against the goal of our tax system. And so the Utah State Supreme Court and precedent that's come out of Utah, like Utah County versus Intermountain Healthcare, has held that those abatements and easement or exemptions, any kind of preferential tax treatment has to be strict and narrowly constructed. We don't want to give a tax preferential treatment to a property that is not used for agricultural production, for example, in the Greenbelt situation, when it doesn't qualify to the law. And it needs to strictly and narrowly be interpreted. It has to fully qualify, and the burden of proof is upon the taxpayer applicant to have that apply. And so it is a tremendous disservice to our farmers and our ranchers if we grant Greenbelt status to properties that aren't entitled to it. We're fortunate to have a couple of board members that understand agricultural production and understand the Farmland Assessment Act and what's required. In Utah, the law looks to Utah State University and some tables that have been published as to what kinds of agricultural production has to be present on a property for it to qualify for this very preferential tax treatment. And it's got to be at least 50% of the average of the acreage in comparable areas. So we can talk more about that if there are questions. In this particular property, the JMMS Enterprises lost their tax exempt status. In 2014, there was a change of title. So by operation of law under Section 509 of the Assessment Act, they lost their preferential treatment, their Greenbelt status. They challenged that ultimately through the Tax Commission and into the district courts. They will, and they note in some of their submissions with this application that they did not get some of the notices. They allege that was the county's fault. No adjudicatory body has agreed with them on that point. They left some address information out of their materials, and so they didn't get some of the notices that they had hoped to get. But they lost their Greenbelt status by operation of law in 2016. Since that time, they've come back before the county asking to have a new Greenbelt status instated on the property, and that's what brought them to this hearing today. And so from the assessor's office perspective, there are submissions that they have supplied that are wholly inadequate to carry the burden of proof. I don't know if the commissioners have the packets of information that were submitted for this appeal in front of you, but I'd like to point your attention if you do, and if not, Bert Harvey has some of them by email, and there's, I think in the third email you received, there's a large file that is the actual application packet. And in that application packet, you see a couple of different statements from a Michael Stewart, his declarations respecting their efforts to have Greenbelt status established on these properties. So they have a significant parcel, and I'll have Diane Garcia talk a little bit about the details, about 30 some odd acres that they have They had taken a portion off to build apartment complexes. They have a remainder that has debris from construction, mounds of dirt, it has some weeds. It does not have agricultural production in the view of the Utah County Assessor's Office and the inspectors and the appraisers that have been out there and the auditors that have looked at the property on many occasions over the last 5 years as this particular parcel's been in litigation. And so what they are contending in their declarations is that a rotational grazing process with a neighboring property, the Crandall Farms, allows sufficient agricultural use for the purpose of cattle grazing to qualify. We disagree. As a factual matter, that's not the case. And so what you'll see in the packet, what you'll hear from our appraiser is that in fact the Crandall Farm and the Crandall properties are separated from the JMMS property by a very busy road. Cattle don't get across that road unless they're transported across that road, which hasn't happened in the last couple of years, and certainly hasn't been an aspect that has occurred recently. There's been no evidence of bales of hay or hay growth there that has been baled as agricultural production would demand. Their declaration and their arguments are that the rotational grazing has allowed some use of the land sufficient to meet the production requirements. It doesn't. What the formula that they attempt to employ, and even if we were to, for the purposes of argument, accept their formula and their numbers, they need to have 67 what we call AUMs, or animal unit months, I think is what that stands for. And the idea of AMUs is that if there's animals that are on a property periodically, but then off the property, there's a certain amount of production that has to be generated. Our inspectors, again, have not ever seen cattle on this particular property in the last 2 years, but even if there had been cattle on the property, they haven't been there sufficiently. And one of the problems and tragedies of JMMS's application is that it's missing details. You'll see in the April statement of Michael Stewart, if you look to paragraph 24 of that statement, there's a section there where the form that's been prepared by counsel for the property owner has blanks to list the number of heads of cattle that have been turned out at different times, and those blanks are still blank. They haven't been filled out. So the declaration was signed, but the details weren't supplied. Again, the taxpayer carries the burden of proof on these applications. There are also some conflicting statements between the West Crandall and the property owner on what they believe was on the property at different times. There's one declaration that says up to 100 head of cattle were turned out on the properties in this area. Another says 35 to 50 head of cattle were turned out for 2 or 3 times a year for 7 to 10 days. And those vague ranges are problematic in an application like this, where the property owner bears the burden of proof. When the best practice, obviously, if I'd been counsel to the property owner and they were trying to prepare a new application for Greenbelt status and to comply under the Farmland Assessment Act, the best practice would have been to take very detailed information, have photographs, numbers of the cattle that were on the property, name them all, have every detail you can possibly have, because you're looking to apply for Greenbelt status. There's over $400,000 at stake in rollback taxes that were assessed in 2016, and penalties and money that hasn't been paid, taxes that are obligated for the past few years that have not yet been paid. And so it's a significant amount of money, but to have prepared their application properly, they should have brought forward clear and compelling evidence of this agricultural production that they claim. And the declarations that the board has before you don't satisfy that standard. They leave ranges and gaps and questions 2 or 3 times. Well, which is it? What were the dates? What are the details that have not been supplied? And for those reasons, after we've heard from the applicant themselves, we'll present the testimony of Diane Garcia. She's been under the weather, asked me to step in at the last minute to assist with this, but she is on Zoom and she does have tremendous experience visiting this property and will testify that there's no evidence of cow patties or consumption of grain, that there's weeds across the fields, that they are not used for agricultural production at all, and they haven't been treated the way that property would be treated by somebody who is genuinely involved in agricultural production. And so for those reasons, we're going to ask the board to deny this request of the taxpayer, but I'm happy to answer questions. I would recommend you hear first from the taxpayer and then hear from Diane.
I prefer to hear from the taxpayer first.
I do too.
You know, let's hear from, it's JMS first. We'll switch computers to have this shown on the screen.
Good afternoon, Commissioner Powers Gardner. Good afternoon, Commissioner Sakewicz. Stuart Pay on behalf of JMS. Are we?
We,
Little bit of a technical difficulties here. Get that resolved.
that would be unfortunate.
This is why we had to recess to make sure this would not happen.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sally, for fixing all of that.
It does. All right, so as Ben has pointed out, I'm here, and as I said, I'm here representing JMMS Enterprises LLC. Michael Stewart, who is the managing partner or managing member of JMMS, is here with us as well. I thought it was interesting, one of Ben's comments. Oh, sorry. I thought one of Ben's comments was very interesting. He mentioned a disservice to ranchers. And one of the key parts of our case today is the statements of the ranchers who are actually ranching this property today. And that's Crandall Farms Incorporated and the Crandall family. And as a Springville boy, I can tell you that the Crandalls have ranched this and many other acres on the west side of Springville for well before I was born. And they continue to ranch this specific parcel just like they did 30, 40, 50 years ago. The parcel at issue, the numbers there on the screen, it's about 34.5 acres. As Ben pointed out, we are appealing the county's partial denial of our Greenbelt application. For reasons that we don't understand even now, the county staff, when it denied the application, denied it only as to about 18 acres, or 17 acres, I guess. Didn't give an explanation of how it calculated that. There's some pretty in-depth calculus that would be involved in calculating any part of this parcel. None of that was given to us. And as we said, the relief we request is a granting of our appeal. I think it's also, Ben went into the background issues, and I'll get into the facts of that a little bit, but I do want to point one thing out. He mentioned $400,000 at issue. That is an issue that will be before the Board of Commissioners in your capacity as commissioners. Today, we're dealing just with the application that we filed a few months ago. There's a map of the property right there. As you look at that, just to orient it a little bit, on the right side or the east side of that map, you would see I-15. Highway 77 is also known as 4 South, which takes you from I-15 into Springville. If you go east, if you go west, it takes you towards the south part of the lake in Spanish Fork. Oh, and I should point out, the piece of properties that the Crandalls continue to own today are on the other side of Highway 17, or Highway 77. And Crandalls use this property, and we'll get into the statements from Wes Crandall, who's actually doing the cattle operation there. They rotate the cattle between these 3 parcels. Obviously, the cattle can only eat so much grass. They eat it down. They move the cattle to a new parcel. Yeah, you'd have to do it when traffic was light and closed down the road, but that's what you do. As I mentioned, the Crandalls previously owned this property for decades. It was acquired. We acquired it through a third party. Once we acquired it, we entered into an oral lease with Crandalls for them to continue their ranching and their ranching activities on the property. The use has not changed for decades, about which the Crandalls have testified, and we'll go through that. A few photos of the property. That's looking east-southeast towards Maple Mountain. You see the grass is high, the cows are there. Irrigation's going. Again, more pictures looking east there and south and east. The grass is low, the cattle dissipate into the background. One thing I would point out, and you can see it especially in this photo, the way the Crandalls are managing the cattle, if you will, is through an electric fence. You can see the electric wire passing there. You can see the single little pole there. It's, like I say, it's 34 acres, so they can use it at different times, and you can move the electrical fence pretty quickly to change where you're grazing. Obviously, when the grass is down, the cows are gone. When it's back, they're there.
When were these photos taken?
These photos, so the one of them goes back, this one right here, the one on the left goes back to 2013 before the construction.
Okay.
Then the rest of them are after, and you can see the construction start to appear there on the right. You can see the apartment buildings coming up out of the ground. There's the apartment buildings in their fullness there on the left. More apartment buildings, the cattle there, and then the apartment buildings again. All right. Now, Ben made a point, and I think it's important to go over this, even though it's not really what's at issue today. And that is what happened with the original taxes and the original loss of status. In 2014, they're late in the year, as you can see, JMS acquired the property. It transferred it to a sister company, General Construction and Development, Inc., which is highlighted there. And they did that to get a trust deed. On December 23rd, 2014, both the warranty deed transferring the property from JMS to GCD was recorded, as was the trust deed that you can see a part of here on your screen. On the trust deed, it says send tax notices to, has the right address there on University Avenue in Provo, Utah. On the warranty deed, there was an error made, and Provo was omitted from the warranty deed. Instead, it just listed University Avenue. There was no Orem or Provo for that matter, and there was no zip code. For whatever reason, the county mailed for the next 3 years tax notices to this fictional address in Orem of University Avenue, Orem, Utah, which I think we can all stipulate does not exist. The tax notices apparently came back and were not corrected. We were out of time because all this had started in 2015. We were out of time for many of our appeals, and that has been part of the problem with the appeals going forward.
And the date stamp on this is 2014, December.
Yep.
So for the 2015 cycle.
Right. So the county, at all relevant times, the county had the correct address on its records.
I'm going to note also that the date stamp shows at 4:25 p.m. on December 23rd. I don't know how many people at 4:30 p.m. the day before Christmas Eve are on their game. But I think a highly understaffed office of the recorder's office, as we've established, has been behind since 2011. A highly understaffed office 30 minutes before Christmas Eve holiday begins may not be super on par.
Commissioners, I could just point out, again, not really the issue present today, but this is a document, it's a trust deed, and trust deeds do not trigger address changes. So even if, I mean, you know, regardless of time or day or whenever, at the county, we would not have looked at this document for an address. We would have looked at the warranty deed, which Mr. Pay mentioned did not include a city, state, or zip code.
Is this the warranty deed that was entered literally the same day, same time, and same minute?
Yes.
Probably.
Okay.
Yes, it is. And on that same time, or yes. So to give a little more background on the proceeding we've referenced, we're in litigation at the state. We entered into a deferral agreement with the county attorney's office to go through with this application and to go through with an application before the Board of Commissioners. And that's where we are today. So in May, I believe we filed our application. Here's the denial letter we received. I think the key thing here is the second sentence. This decision was based on information that was provided with the application, physical audits, and aerial photography. Now, no, a number of physical audits is given. The audits themselves aren't given. We have no paperwork about when people were there, what pictures were taken. Aerial photography, again, same thing. If you go down a little bit farther to the second to last sentence, the parcel is 34.536 acres, and only 17.46 acres had any cattle on it in the last 2 years. Again, nothing's given to establish that, and as we'll see, the rancher who is actually running the property will conflict that testimony. This is the parcel, and I just wanted to orient everybody on this photograph before we get a little deeper. So one of the key points here is you can see through the middle of the parcel there, you can see a ditch that travels through. Flood irrigation goes to the north and south of the ditch, all the way to the road on the north for a few hundred meters to the south. There are parts of the parcel that have high alkali soil that are just grazed and not watered. Here are some of the pictures that the county did provide us. These ones here appear to be down in that southwest corner where there's the high alkali soils. But even here, you can see in the picture on the right side that there is some growth. In the middle, there is some growth. And then you get up on these two pictures on the left, which are up in the north part of the parcel. You can see where it's been irrigated, where the grazing has taken place. Now, again, going back to Ben's statement earlier, talking about taxation and talking about ranchers and disservices to ranchers. The Greenbelt status is obviously a highly sought after status that landowners look for in this state. But there's a reason for the Greenbelt status, and that is because ranchers and farmers want to use the property. They want to use it, and if they're going to use it, they're going to get this tax break. And the question before you today is, are the ranchers using this property, using it sufficient to be eligible for that tax break? And I'll get to the statements of Wes Crandall in a minute, but I want to point out, this isn't the case where JMMS is renting a few cows to throw on a piece of property. This isn't something where we're just doing whatever it is to keep the status. What happened here was part of the property was, when we obtained the property, part of it was developed and the rest of it was entered into an oral agreement with Crandall's for them to continue their age-old ranching business in West Springville. Wes Crandall is the son of the owner of Crandall Farms and is the guy that actually runs the cattle operation. And you heard Ben say that, there were inconsistent statements in some of the declarations. His declaration or his statement is pretty clear. After the grass is grown, we turn approximately 100 head of cattle each year to rotationally graze the land around the Crandall property, Crandall Farms and the JMS property for about 4 months or so until the cattle eat down the grass. In 2019, they approximately 100 head of cattle in that area, approximately 100 head in 2020, and they're in the process of hitting the approximately 100 head again this year. I suppose if we hired an accountant to go out and to count the cattle each day, to tag them each day, and to do all of that, we could find the evidentiary burden that council's looking for. However, that is not the burden in the statute. That is not the burden in any case law I've reviewed. The burden is simply we have to show that it's actively engaged in agriculture. Having 100 head of cattle rotationally move through the property is, in a common sense way, a clear indication that it is actively engaged in agriculture. However, if we get in, well, we'll go through one more. Before we go to the technical equation, we'll go through one more. And this is the statements he was talking about. Crandalls irrigate the property every 15 to 20 days. It takes the cattle about 7 to 10 days, and then they rotate them. Over 4 months, that's 40 days. Crandalls place 35 to 50 head of cattle on the property at any given time, 100 to 150 cattle over the 4-month period. It's also important to note JMMS has invested in regular upkeep and irrigation maintenance on the property. Now, the Farmland Assessment Act is found in Utah Code Annotated 592-502. The standard is actively devoted to agricultural use, and that means producing in excess of 50% of the average agricultural production per acre for the given type of land and in the county or area. The Act continues to say that the way you can calculate this, and the preferred way, I suppose, is the production levels report in current publication by the Utah Agricultural Statistics. We looked that up. According
Would
to...
you go back one more?
You bet. And that's from 59-2-503.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. For the property that's grazed and not irrigated, we have to have 1 animal unit per month. For the property that is irrigated, we have to have 5.21 animal units per month. And so if you run this, so we called the Department of Agriculture to understand how we would calculate that in this case where not all of it's grazed and not all of it is irrigated. In the irrigated grazed portion, which according to our surveyor is roughly 23 acres or 66%, if you take 66% times the 35.536 acres times 5.21, which is the AUM for irrigated and grazed property where there are cows, times that by 0.5 because you have to hit half of the average. You put in a 1 for some reason that wasn't clear to us, and you get 60 cows for 1 month or 50 cows for 4 months. On the grazed portion, you take the 34%, which is roughly 11 plus acres, times the total acreage, times the 1 AUM, times the 0.5, again plus the 1, and you get 7 cows for 1 month or 2 cows for 4 months. And so total, you end up with 62 cows or 67 cows for a month or 17 cows for 4 months. As the Crandalls have said, for each of the last 3 years, they've had 100 head of cattle on the property, rotationally grazing. It takes them 7 to 10 days each month, which gets us to about 40 days and 100 cows.
So the first was irrigated / grazed, means it's a mixed use.
No, meaning that we're watering that. So there's part of it that I would say is irrigated, and then part of it's just traditional dry land Utah farming.
It's dry farm versus irrigated farm.
Yep.
So you alternate what you do with that land, either irrigate or dry farm it.
No, there's one part of it that due to the
Right. I was
due
just
to
trying
gravity we can't.
I was just
irrigate.
trying to distinguish between irrigated / grazed and grazed.
Right. So grazed, the cows will be on the grazed part, but it won't be irrigated grass. They'll be on the irrigated grazed part, but that'll be irrigated
Okay.
grass. Does that make sense?
I got it, yeah.
Okay. Even if we assume, by the way, that the whole acres, if we watered the whole thing, we get to 91 cows, which is still less than the 100 cows we're putting on there. In conclusion, and going back to the county's key point about ranchers and a disservice to them, one of Utah County's final large cattle operations is using this property. It's used it for as long as anyone in South Utah County can probably remember. They're using it for 100 head of cattle a year. We have a statement from their cattle manager, if you will, Wes Crandall, saying that's what they've done for 2019, 2020, and it's our understanding that they're on course for that again in 2021. As a result of this, there's just no basis for the county to deny this Greenbelt application. This is the type of property that should continue in the Greenbelt, continue to be used as agricultural land, which is the Crandall's intent and JMMS's intent at this time. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to field those.
Why didn't JMMS ask for the missing notices when the addresses were incorrect?
So they hold between 50 and 100 pieces of property, and they just didn't track them close enough to realize it. And, the notices came in, they paid the ones they got the notices for and moved on.
Well, that's a separate issue, right?
Right.
Right.
That's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah, this is just taking the totality of this. Okay.
Anything else?
Let's hear from the
I will
council.
have questions at the end, though.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we may have quite a bit of conversation and questions back and forth. And we want to hear from Diane and show some of the documents as well, some of the photographs that the county's auditors and analysts have looked at. There are a few things that need to be pointed out about this conversation that we just heard. Again, we're looking at, in many cases, photographs from 2013 when this property did have Greenbelt status, where the cattle actually appear in photographs, but the photographs that the applicant has provided are undated, not time-stamped. The information is incomplete, and I want to take a close look, and I'd encourage the board to look very closely at the language used by Wes Crandall in this declaration. He says, again, in 2019, we turned approximately 100 head of cattle to rotationally graze the land in or around Crandall property, Crandall Farms property, and JMMS property. So that statement's true if they never touched Crandall Farms or if they never touched the JMMS property. All he says, and why it's legally insufficient to establish Greenbelt production levels, is because his statement is that there's 100 cattle in that general area. He never says there was 100 cattle on that parcel. And again, we're talking about property that, and cattle where the statements in the declaration of Michael Stewart are also ambiguous. They say things like 35 to 50. They say things like 2 or 3 times a year, 7 to 10 days. It's not 4 months. It's not 1 month. If you're talking about 2 times for 7 days each, that's a couple of weeks on the property, if it even happened. But the testimony that you'll hear from the appraiser and the analyst is that they never were on the property at all in the last 2 years. And the last 2 years are the relevant years for the Greenbelt renewed application here to get Greenbelt status established now. So we'd encourage the board to look very closely at the language and what they've actually said versus what they are hoping to present the impression of, because there's a significant difference in this case. We've got a property that hasn't actually had cattle on it, isn't baling hay, isn't being used for agricultural production. And with that, I'd like to invite, if Diane Garcia is still on the line, I'd like to invite Diane to come on through Zoom and answer a few questions and just talk about what she did in her investigations and what she's seen. And then Bert has the photographs that she took. You heard counsel for the applicant say that there was nothing but a single statement and no photographs, and then show some photographs acknowledged came from the assessor's office. But Bert has all of those photographs and can share some of those.
And the photographs are in the agenda item. So you can pull those up from the agenda item
Yeah,
if you
you
want
show
to
them
view those.
there, and Diane may want to reference specific ones. Can you hear us, Diane?
And can you show?
Yes,
this
I can.
For the public as well.
Yeah, can you pull those up, Bert?
He's actively working on that.
1 second.
Thank you.
And Diane, I want to just leave this kind of open-ended for you to just talk about the work that you've done, how the frequency of investigations from you and others within your office on that property and what you've seen and what you photographed.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Sure. Do you want me to start while we wait for him to do the photos?
Give him a second.
Okay.
He's switching laptops. You'll notice a pretty significant difference in Diane's photographs. They're date stamped, and as I was saying earlier, one of the best practices would be to date stamp and to not leave ranges. I mean, sometimes ranges are unavoidable, but when you know you're in litigation and you're trying to reestablish a greenbelt status, that's the time when you at least say, these are the specific dates cattle were on our property, and these are the specific numbers and tags if that's possible. But regardless, when you're looking to apply for greenbelts, you ought to know the days, you ought to know the number of cattle that you let onto the property, especially when it's a production to get across the busy street that is there now. Go ahead, Diane.
All right. So as was established before, this parcel is 34 acres. And when it was said that I only granted a partial, that was not true. What my letter explained was out of that 34, and it's really like 34 and a half acres, out of that 34 acres, if you go to the next, yeah, just keep going. So this photo is looking to the east, kind of southeast. Okay, so as you see that truck on the left, so that's the road that is 400 south that heads into Springville. And then if you head west, it heads out to Lake Shore and that area. So to the left of that truck across the road is the Crandall's property. To the right, what we're seeing now, and you're looking at those condos, the property in front of us is the JMMS. So you see, there's cement, and there is old fencing that has not been repaired or fixed. There has been times when there has been hot wire put up. I have seen cattle there, but not in the last 2 years. And so one of my things that I look for when people say they're grazing, especially based on what they're saying, is that, I'm very well aware of the Crandalls. I actually bought my horse from Beth Crandall. So I'm very well aware that they are prominent ranchers, and it's something I look for to look for fencing. So to see that there's no permanent fencing put up for something that is put across as a permanent grazing area, this is something that they say they graze every year, so permanent fencing would be an investment that would be very good, especially on these busy roads, adjacent to all these busy roads, so cattle do not cause accidents and lawsuits and injury and all that stuff. So that is something I look for is fencing. Okay, go to the next one, Bert. Okay, so that's also looking so that you see that fence line going down. That fence line divides the parcel. So when I said less than half of it was being used, I'm saying since 2014, which they showed 2014 photos, only half or less than half of this parcel could even be used. And you see that fence that divides them. So the stuff that's on the right-hand side where you see those apartment complexes, that ground with all those big piles of dirt, that is part of this parcel, and that makes up just over 17 acres of the parcel. That portion of the parcel is not used at all and has not been used at all since those apartments were built in 2014. Next photo, Bert. So this is looking to the west, and it's showing that portion that is that is the, what I calculated, I say the unused parcel, meaning it's not had any crops, cattle, or anything since 2014. Okay, next one. Next one. Next one. Okay, so this is looking, basically this is North Main Street coming out of Spanish Fork into Springville. So on this road, there are lots of, to the left, you can't see it, but there's condos, and all the people that live or rent in those condos, they park along this road. And so you can see there's no, sorry, there's no permanent fencing established at all. Next photo. And that just shows there's no fencing. This is the portion they're saying is being used. Next one.
Diane, this is Bert. Do you want
Yeah.
photo file 3 or photo file 2 or photo file 1?
I don't know, because I don't know what those are.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. So, so that's looking to the east. Next one. And again, you can see, you know, chunks of cement not being cleaned up from past construction or alterations to the property. So those are other things I look for when someone is actively using their land for agricultural production, especially putting livestock in. It's not cost effective to leave junk and old wires and things that the animals can get caught up in. That's not very good management. So I look for those things as far as basically management. I look for reseeding. I look for weed control. All those things that would be pasture improvement. Any rancher or farmer that owns the land will always be improving it because it's potential income for them. So if you always put your cattle out in a field of weeds, they don't have the best benefit and the best ratio of weight gain based on that feed. So, so it just goes for management. Next photo. And that's again showing that fence line. So everything on the right-hand side is all those piles of dirt and cement and things from the construction, the 17 acres. Next photo. Next one. That's all that portion. You can see all the piles of dirt. Cattle have not been on that property since 2014. Next one. Next one. Keep going. Are we going around? Okay. And this is right along that road that is that North Main Street. So this is looking out, obviously this is May 13th. So I would like to mention a couple of things as we look at this photo. One of them is in the very top, you see kind of that red barn and you see all those black dots. That's the Crandall's property and that's their cattle across the street on their property. So the presentation that JMMS just did, one of the things that he said was that the cattle are often on the property, whatever, 7 days, 10 days each month from May until late September. So on Wes Crandall's statement in the documents that they provided, Wes Crandall says on number 7 of that document, he says, after the cattle have eaten the grass down to a certain level, we transport them to a ranch up north during the summer months. So Wes Crandall's statement contradicts the statement that was just said that the cattle are on this property from May to late September. So as you can see, there is not much evidence that things have been eaten down. Granted, this is May 13th, that photo was taken. But according to Wes Crandall, he says that the cattle are taken up north, and I know for a fact they own property in Wyoming and Idaho, and that's usually where they often take their cattle. Next photo. That's basically the corner looking to the north. So the land on the other side of that road is the Crandalls, and this is the corner of that highway headed out to Lakeshore and the end of North Main Street from Spanish Fork. Next one. And then that's looking to the south, and that's showing those apartment complexes, and that was the construction that split this parcel originally when JMMS acquired this land, and they built those apartments on there. Next one. Okay, so this is more of May 13th, 2021. Next one.
Diane, just a quick point on the last few slides. Those, the weeds look like they've been bedded down by some animal. The last several slides, so it could be cattle, it could be deer,
yeah.
but that's what it looks like.
No, actually, it's probably all the people that park their cars and trailers along that road because there's no fence.
Oh, what I was referring to is just the way the weeds were twisted.
Yeah, no.
It makes it look like it was bedded down by some animal.
Yeah.
That one and the next couple, I think.
Yeah, if you actually look at that, do you see how the grass in the middle is standing up? Mm-hmm. So it really is the tracks to tires of cars that drive out on that field,
right? And
they park their trailers and stuff.
Yeah, I see that, as I also see the potential for animal bedding there, not because the animals didn't do it and cars and vehicles didn't use it, but animals are just using trails that have been established by them, or that humans started it and animals picked it up, or other way around, humans follow animal tracks in some cases in this bedding area. And that's why I'm just reaching here. It looks like the way the weeds are twisted, it seems to be a bedding rather than the trailers or trucks driving over it.
Yeah, no, it's trailers and trucks driving over it. There's wheel marks all over. If Bert goes back to that one that shows the corner, it kind of had that electrical box.
Yes, that's what I'm curious about too. Is that on this side of the electrical box? Is that the Crandall's property as well? That would be number. I don't see it.
I think it was in the group before, Bert. Yeah, I think it was in that other group. Yeah. Try picture 9.
There you go.
Okay, that one. So you can see the tire tracks of vehicles that have gone through to the left of that box that says 17 on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see that.
So everything that's pushed down and run down, there's trash. Vehicles drive through there all the time because there's no fencing to keep them from doing that. And a lot of them, they can't park their trailers in their condo area. And so they park out on the street. So then when they need to get out, they often just turn around in this field, in the corner of this field. I've seen them do it. That's why I'm saying that. So I drive by this parcel at least once a week and sometimes twice a week because I head out that way out North Main Street out of Spanish Fork since I live in Spanish Fork. I also have a friend who lives in those condos, so. Okay, go on to that one. Thank you, Bert. Okay, so this is the portion that has the piles of soil on it from the construction that has never had cattle on it since 2014. Next one. So you can see that there's no fencing, there's no, you can see there's really no growth of much of anything. So for this to be May 13th, and there's just remnants of all the old weeds. Next one. And you can see there that people drive through that parcel like it's their turnaround spot. They get to those apartments by cutting through those fields. And they've established a very well worn road. Next one. So that shows you how worn the road is through the parcel that is being used by a lot of the occupants in the apartments that are to the south of the parcel that were once a part of the parcel. Yep, next one. That's what that looks like. Next one. Next one. That's another one showing the road and showing all the piles of debris and junk. Next one. Next one. So that's me standing on that road that runs through the property, showing what it looks like looking to the east. Okay, and then go to Assessor Photos 3. Okay, so while I was there, the property manager of those apartments came and dumped more junk on the parcel that JMMS is claiming there's agricultural production on. Next one. Lots of people there's all sorts of stuff being dumped on this property, so it is not being managed for agricultural production. It has a sidewalk going along the one side. Next one. There's that road again, and you can see the piles of people dump old sod, rocks, all sorts of stuff. It's a continual dumping site, not being managed as a grazing field or even a hay field. Next one. And see the old wires sticking up. There's old wires and junk in all these piles. Next one. Next one. These are starting to head down towards the west side of the property. Next one. So that's me standing on one of the big dirt piles, kind of giving an overview, looking to the west. Next one. So now that shows, look, obviously you can see Timpanogos, so that's looking north. And that truck driving along, that's the truck driving along that road that divides the Crandall's property from JMMS, which is that 400 south that heads out. So that kind of shows you the difference there. Next one. And then you can see that in the background, that barn across the road, that's the Crandalls with the cattle on their property, not on JMMS's property. Yep, next one. And then that shows you the end. So all those piles behind that white fence, that's also a part of JMMS's parcel. I look for management of property. So the way the law reads is that the land is actively devoted to agricultural production with a reasonable expectation of profit. So what's interpreted by a reasonable expectation of profit is that you're managing the land for it to produce you an agricultural product for profit. And so I look for certain things for that. So obviously, the land has never been leveled off. It's never been reseeded since the construction in 2014. There's no weed control. There's no permanent fencing. There's no means to even keep people from trespassing and degrading the land even more. It's totally a free-for-all for cars to drive and dump, and it's not being managed at all. Okay, next one, go to the Assessor 4 one, and I'll see what that one is. Okay, so that's just more photos. Now this, okay, so this is photos I took in April of 2019. So these are 2019 photos. Next. So, I included 2018, 2019, and 2021 photos in my packet. I only have to look at the previous 2 years. That's all that's required. Whenever someone submits an application like JMMS did, they submitted for the 2021 year. So I don't look at what agricultural production occurred on this property in 2015 or 2016 or 2017. I only am required to see proof that the property had met the agricultural production requirements for the previous 2 years. Okay, so now go to the one that says Assessor Aerials and it has a J on it. No, next one. What is that one? Okay, so that is our kind of orientation as to what that looks like. Is there just one photo in that file, or is there two? So go to, go to number 2. Okay, so this shows you an aerial view of what it currently looks like on that portion that I deemed was just over 17 acres that has not had any agricultural production whatsoever since 2014. So even if the other portion, which isn't even half of the parcel, had some cattle on and off whenever, we still don't know exactly which months. We still don't know exactly how many for me to calculate those animal unit months. But the entire parcel is not being used. And actually not even half of the parcel is being used. So a couple of years ago, I did speak with the property owner, and I told him if he was not able to get this south portion into production, it might benefit him to break that off as a separate parcel and then get the cattle on the other parcel that could be more conducive to grazing and at least qualify that acreage. But the whole thing cannot qualify when more than half of it is not being used at all. I think you can click on that next one. These are just up close ones. Some of these they used in their presentation. Those just show all the hills of dirt and stuff that you saw the physical on-site photos I took. To the right, you can see all the cars that are parked in the apartment complex. And I think we're done with the photos. So Ben, so I think if you have any questions of me, I think I covered everything.
Yeah, I don't know that I have any questions specifically. The counsel for JMMS indicated that there was an oral agreement. Have you ever seen a lease agreement, any kind of written agreement at any time?
Have not seen a lease agreement. Usually that is required when there's a lessee. And I have not seen any lease agreement between the Crandalls and JMMS.
When you say that's required, is that required in statute, or is that just something we ask for?
Well, actually, in statute, it says that you have to receive a statement from the lessee, and if you don't receive a statement, it can't qualify. We have these statements, but they're conflicting. But usually, to establish them as the lessee, a lease is required.
Yeah, under common law,
Play and required don't typically go hand in hand. Usually it's required or it's not.
right. Under the common law, a contract that involves land that's going to last more than a year requires a writing for the statute of frauds. So,
Right, but that's for a completely different
Right.
concept of
Yeah.
law. We want to get into the statute of law.
Also, I want to point out on Wes Crandall's statement on number 10, he says, this year we will turn approximately 100 head of cattle to rotationally graze the land in the same area over a 4-month period or so. So this statement was signed April 30th of 2021. And that statement sounds like they haven't done anything yet for 2021. And again, he says 4 months, but yet previously on his statement in number 7, it says that they take the cattle up north and the cattle are not there during the summer at all.
so I guess just to sum up and then open this up for any further questions or whatever, the assessor's office has not seen any cattle in the last 2 years or any indicia of cattle. None of the things that you would see, the improvements, the efforts that are required by statute to make sure that the land is being maintained and operated with a reasonable expectation of profit. Over half the property has no agricultural production at all. The other half hasn't seen any agricultural production in the last 2 years that are the relevant 2 years. And if there even was rotational grazing in the past, Wes Crandall's statement doesn't say that. What Wes Crandall's statement says is that in or around this area and several other parcels, he's turned out 100 head of cattle. So there's been a total failure of the sufficiency of evidence to establish the burden that the taxpayer bears to ask for this green belt. That's why it was rejected. We would ask the Board of Equalization to deny the appeal or at a minimum continue this matter so that Wes Crandall can be examined for what he actually has done. But they haven't shown dates. They haven't shown numbers. They haven't shown specificity or details or any of the indicia at all of agricultural production. And you may have one, I guess just to sort of speak to a mischaracterization of one of my earlier statements, you may have one landowner that's a neighbor that wants to be a good neighbor and is willing to sign a statement that he didn't prepare and that doesn't say anything of any substance to be a good neighbor. But on the whole, ranchers and farmers are disserved by overextension of the Greenbelt benefits of preferential tax treatment that the Farmland Assessment Act has very specific requirements to qualify for. So again, the county assessor's position is that this matter should be denied or in the alternative continued for further evidence to actually make the case that has not yet been made.
Let's see, for council.
Oh, Ben?
Yes.
Can I add one thing? So also on number 11, on Wes Crandall's statement, he says that the Crandall farms continue to graze cattle and raise hay and irrigate the property. We have not received anything showing us hay production, how many bales per acre, tons per acre, anything like that for us to calculate this hay raising, which physically when I go see the property, I don't see any kind of hay production.
Quick question. What is the total acreage of the property?
34.56.
34.56. Interesting. Okay.
And the area
It's a
that's,
funny number, isn't it?
Well, no, I think it's interesting because we've heard several times that 17 acres is not being used and that's less than half. But last time I checked, 34.56 is more than twice what 17 acres is.
Okay, so I want to start out with a couple things. Ms. Garcia went after the statement as number 10, was signed in April. We were careful not to make Mr. Crandall say something that had not happened in April of 21. Obviously, we were very careful that most of what was going to go on in the property was still going forward. As far as pictures, I just want to point out that the pictures you saw today were from 3 dates that were supplied by the county staff. Those were from April of 19, May of 19, and May of 21. as far as photographs, and I've got them on the phone here, date stamp photographs that show cattle, and I'm happy to provide these. Interestingly, the May 19 date is, I think it was
The 13th.
May 13th, yes.
I
So
have- no.
8 days later, on May 21st, we took some photographs that show numerous head of cattle, embarrassing, head of cattle on the property. And we can provide those. I did a quick count. I got 25 in the lens real quick. We can provide those to you. I think that should deal with the 19th. If the burden here, and remember the burden as I understand it is just oh my goodness, propelling. The pictures clearly show that the cows are there. They were there. Also, we'll show another. We can provide another picture from, and I want to get this date right so I don't misstate it. And I wrote it down, but I can't read it now.
Because some of that area that the county took pictures of did not have fencing, some of it did have fencing, so I'm curious about that, of course.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And let me say the other date that we'll provide with a whole bunch of cattle in it, ironically on the west part of the parcel, is October 23rd, 2019. Having grown up a little bit around agriculture, nothing ever goes as you plan. If the summer goes long or the fall goes long, I'm sure they leave the cattle there. We can get more testimony on that if it's necessary. With respect to the fencing that has been used since the oral agreement began is electric fencing, which is just pull the post out, push it back in. There are parts that don't have permanent fencing. However, I am never going to tell, nor is my client ever going to tell the lessee how to run cattle. And if he feels it's sufficient for the electric fencing, then it's sufficient for the electric fencing in our mind.
And even the areas that it appears, at least on the photographs, there were no fencing, even electric fencing.
Well, the way normally electric fencing, the way I've always used it is you go out, you put it out there when in our case, horses are out there, and then we'd strip it down in the winter and put it in and then put them in the permanent fenced areas or in the barns for the winter.
And in this case, that was in spring that I didn't see in some of these images.
If you will look at the October 23rd, 2019 picture that we'll submit, you can see in the foreground the electric wire running through it. And by the way, the photograph is taken from the road facing, I'm going to say south or west-southwest. You can see the single wire there. Also, in the photos that were on my presentation, you could see the wire. And again, on a picture that's facing due south, that's a 2018 picture, but a 2019 picture, again, facing east this time, coming from Highway 77, you can see the single strand electric wire in there in front of the cattle.
I would like a 5-minute break I've got a couple of questions, but I want to maybe mull through them in my head and put them in an order that makes sense. Because I've taken 2 pages of questions here.
Sure.
And I'm wondering if you can give me a few minutes to
So
review
5-minute
those.
recess.
5 minutes, and then I can review these and maybe go through in order. Would that be okay?
That works.
Be great.
Okay.
Okay, well, so we'll take a 5-minute recess and get back here at 3:33 thereabouts.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we are back from our 5-minute recess, and we'd like to continue. And I think council wanted to address, for the plaintiff wanted to address a few more things, or was it the county wanted to do?
Well, I have questions.
I don't know that we have anything specific that we want to add. I was looking at some numbers, and I guess 17 point something and 34 point something is pretty close to half. I would just be happy to answer any questions if you have any for the county assessor's office. I'm sure council.
I think
for
most
the-
of my questions are probably going to be for the property owner. There may
I'll
be
have a
some
seat
for
unless
both.
you need me.
Yeah,
Just,
All right.
great.
no, I'll jump back out.
Yeah, I'll just kind of run through these. Does the property owner mow this property?
No.
Do you have pictures of the grass or the weeds being low?
Being low, like eaten down? Mm-hmm. We do.
From the last few years?
From the last 2 years? We'll
Okay,
check, pull those
this
up.
is fine. So I just,
Okay.
so if you don't mow it, then I'm going to assume that it doesn't magically become short.
Right. And
Whether
I
or not there's a
think-
picture of a cow on it.
I think, hold on, let me just check the picture.
Okay. Next is what have you done to maintain the irrigation or the irrigation lines?
So in our papers that we submitted, we actually have a statement and the invoices from the engineering outfit that did that.
Okay.
They can
So you do
describe-
have like receipts that show
Right.
that you've paid to maintain those lines?
Right.
Okay. Who owns those water shares?
We do,
Okay, so
don't we? Crandall's do. I
the
thought.
Crandalls own those water shares. So I'm just going to go out on a limb here and assume that a farmer is not using his water shares to water your property unless he's using it.
That's right.
That's just an assumption here.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that one of the assertions said that that the statute says that you profit from the land, that you profit from land for agricultural purposes, and that's part of the one of the expectations. If you're not, how do you profit from this land? Yeah. Yeah.
So my name is Mike Stewart with JMMS.
Mm-hmm.
We owned, or JMMS owned the land for many years before any construction was done. And the verbal agreement between myself and Calvin Crandall happened when Calvin was on his backhoe. They had operated and ranched the property for decades. I said, just keep doing it. I have been out there on the back of myself. I have cleaned irrigation ditches. You asked the question how we profit from the property.
Mm-hmm.
The property that the Crandalls are ranching, we don't. Someday we will do something with it. We haven't done anything on that property since I think 17, 15, or I should know 16 or 17. But as far as the portion that had the construction done on it, yeah, we and the Crandalls, and you can speak to Calvin, he was there with us. We extended the irrigation through the construction so that they had their head gates, they had their boxes. We can pull water from Dry Creek. The reason there's no vegetation or cattle shown, and I can't say because it's Chase Crandall that runs the cattle, that actively manages the cattle on the ground. If you look at even the county's aerial photography, you'll see no vegetation before there was any construction. You can go back to 08, 09, 2010, before we were involved with it. Nothing grows. I call it acidic. I'm not sure what a farmer or someone at Utah State would call that soil, but it doesn't support vegetation. You can look in, I think it's in one of the photos in Stewart's presentation that shows that section before any construction. There's no vegetation that grows on it. So where the Crandalls choose to run the cattle is based on where there's vegetation.
Right. Okay. So, one of my questions was, do we have any photos that are not from April or May? Because I understand that things
have-
hadn't been done in April or May, but you're going to send those to us.
If they
Okay.
come through to Bert, there should be the one there from October.
Okay.
It's dated October of 19.
And, I mean, the way I understand is that the parcel has to meet a certain threshold. And whether or not you meet that threshold on 10% of the property or 50% of the property still met the threshold. So the dry half Irrigated half doesn't bother me because if you're meeting the threshold, you're meeting the threshold. So that I tend to understand. Do we have any reason, and this is the question for Ben, do we have any reason to believe that the Crandalls would be lying?
I don't have any reason to believe the Crandalls are lying, but what the Crandall statement says is different than what counsel for JMMS is indicating that the Crandall statement says. So the Crandall statement is a hedge. It's a carefully drafted legal document that says, yes, I turn 100 head of cattle in this area, either this property or that property or that property or around those properties, essentially.
Right. Okay, but evidence is a farmer does not irrigate land they're not using. They don't use their water shares to irrigate another person's property if they're not using it. So evidence would suggest to me that his statement is true. I could see the statement of him being a nice neighbor if he was going to church on Sunday with this person, but he's not going to church with people from a property management or a property holding company. And so, as I look at this, I feel inclined as a farmer myself to take a farmer at their word. I don't see a reason why a farmer would be irrigating a property with their own water shares that they're not using. I understand that the pictures from April, May don't appear that any cattle had been on that land. But in due respect, in April or May, the entire Pace Fruit Growers Association also has not had any production on their land because harvest isn't until later in the year. I understand that roughly half this property is dry property and is not being utilized. But if the threshold is being utilized on the other half of the property, I owned a farm. And I got to tell you, my ex-husband had 7 abandoned vehicles on that farm. And as much as I hated those 7 abandoned vehicles, I still had enough production on that farm, right? A pile of concrete, while not seemly and probably doesn't make good farming, doesn't an abandoned property make. I would like to see the pictures. I would maybe like some clarification from the Crandalls, but I'm right now I'm leaning towards giving this exception because, like I said, I don't really care if half the property isn't used half the year. If the other half of the property meets the threshold, it meets the threshold. The only pictures that the county has come from April or May at the beginning of the season. They haven't even started irrigating it until May. I see a lot of circumstantial evidence. I have no reason to believe that the Crandalls are lying. In fact, evidence tells me they're not because they're using their own water shares to water this property. So as I look at this with my farmer hat on, I'm inclined to approve this exception. I completely understand why the assessor's office didn't, and I don't fault them for that. But at the same time, as a commissioner wearing my farmer hat, I'm inclined to. But I also, I'm leaning right now towards continuing this until the next meeting, and I know we hate to do that, but I wouldn't mind a little bit more evidence coming in. Like I said, I do have questions. Like I'd love, to look at the pictures of the property where maybe the weeds weren't high, right? Because if the weeds aren't high and we're not mowing it, there's a reason. I'm not really concerned about there not being production receipts from growing hay, because if that hay is in the belly of a cattle, we don't have a production receipt for that, right? Because it's in the belly of the cattle. And like I said, the area past the power lines, if it's dry, it's dry. Like I said, I'm not really concerned if we're meeting the threshold in the other area. I understand that, what you're saying, Ben, that in theory we should have what were the cattle tag numbers and how many were there, but I've met a lot of ranchers and most of them say, I got about 100 head of cattle and I kind of run them through that area when I see fit. That's just kind of how ranchers are. So I don't see anywhere in the statute where it says that we have to have a written agreement. So I'm seeing a lot of things that are circumstantial on our side of it. I completely understand why the assessor's office came back with the determination that they did, which is why we're here, which is why we have these meetings for appeals. But maybe it's just, the inner farmer in me sitting here wearing my cowboy boots. But I'm inclined to lean towards the rancher. I think the biggest piece of evidence for me is the fact that the Crandalls irrigate this land with their own water shares. And there's no reason in my mind that a farmer would be using their water shares to irrigate someone else's land if they weren't utilizing it for agricultural purposes. Because I got to tell you, the only other reason I would be using my water shares is if someone was paying me for them, and I'd have a written lease agreement for that. Right? And I don't see that either. So, and I feel like with the Crandalls, they've made a statement. And I feel like we're almost asking them, can you prove to me that you weren't abducted by aliens? Like the burden of proof, they gave us a statement. And I don't have any reason to believe that they're not honest and truthful in their statement. So I'm leaning toward saying yes, but I'm also willing to continue so that we can see these pictures, maybe have a third commissioner here in our next meeting. But if you're inclined to approve, I'm willing to make a motion to approve, but I am inclined to continue.
In the discussions, it sounds like the application information was incomplete. And it sounds like there's additional photographs that are not part of this record. The fencing in the area that looks like it can't be grazed because it looks like it's acidic is being used kind of roughshod by others. So I'm a little concerned by that. At the same time, I know farmers will tend to not put fence up when they absolutely don't need to, but in order to establish
Expensive. Yeah.
legal use, they should put fences up. What lingers for me are additional photographs that might be able to shed some additional light in all of this that was talked about here, but we don't have copies of and the public hasn't seen. And I understand dry farming, the issues, especially with droughts, but in this case, it's more long-term than just the drought. It appears to be acidic. So that leaves questions in my mind on that one. So,
Commissioners, if I may, just for a note for the record, Mr. Stewart sent me several pictures, but they're in a file format I can't open, so unfortunately I'm not able to display those pictures as part of that. So if the ultimate decision is to continue, that'd be great, because then we can let him submit those pictures in a format that we can view, and you can
Yeah.
add those as part of the.
I would
We could also ask the Crandalls if they can give us a little more specific information as well. I think that's a great point. So if you're comfortable with this.
but I would also like some
Yeah.
information.
Yeah.
On the water shares, is there any documentation that they are sharing the water?
So there's Calvin Crandall, the father, and there's Wes Crandall, the son, and then Chase Crandall. So Chase is the one that manages the cattle that are on property. So address what Diane said. The Crandalls, I don't know how many they have, hundreds of cattle. Chase told me they maintain in Springville 100 head of cattle that they rotate on the properties. With respect to the water, Chase told me it's strawberry water. They've had strawberry water this year. He said if we don't get a good snow this next winter, they're
Right.
not sure if they'll have access to their strawberry water shares.
And I've heard that from several farmers on the strawberry line as well.
And my statement, no, I'm not dishonest. I don't know the Crandalls. I didn't reach across the street and say, would you somehow sign this document and help me out? That did not happen.
Yeah.
That's not who I am. I'm the one that took the pictures that have been supplied. They're not photoshopped. The cattle aren't photoshopped. It's disingenuous for me that the county picked dates where there were no cattle. I don't live out there. I live in Provo. I was born and raised here. So when I have been there and cattle have been there, no, I haven't taken pictures every time. I really had no idea that this process required so much legality. I'm not an attorney. I'm a contractor. I work out of my basement. I wear lots of hats. I had no idea that this process was so rigid. Had I known, we could have stepped up our game. But the Crandalls farm the land.
Yeah.
We extended the irrigation. I've had a backhoe. I had to get a trackhoe to get it unstuck maintaining those ditches. So for anyone to say that it's not farmed and it's not irrigated is not truthful. It's this, and I shouldn't say not truthful, but not informed.
Yeah. So I would like just a few specific things. One would be, pictures. Pictures, obviously pictures with cows on the land is good. But also just, if you have pictures of the grass not high, because to me that's evidence that there's been something there. So that's one. And number two, just a statement from the Crandalls that they're the ones who ordered that water from Strawberry Water and put it on. That's a very strong statement to me. If it's their water shares and they're the ones calling up the office there at Strawberry and ordering that water for their watering turns and then making sure that irrigation line is turned on and turned off, that's a very strong statement to me. I would be fine with those two statements, with those two things. The pictures and the statement from the Crandalls, I think, is very,
I have
very
seen
strong.
farmland in Spanish Fork that others have dumped leftover sod and dirt of all kinds of things, cement, and the farmer just dealt with it because it was too much of a heartache to get it moved. In some cases, as she showed on the slides, they were doing it in broad daylight. And this one farmer I have in mind, they did it middle of the night, like at 2 a.m. They would dump their stuff. And they would wiggle their way through open fence line areas where they normally would farm. They would dump this trash on the edges of where they were farming.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have grazing cattle at the time that I saw this, so I understand why the trash is there. And it is a headache to try to move it because it costs time and money and resources to get it removed. And that's where it might be helpful if they had a fence line to prevent that from happening. But at the same time, I understand why farmers don't, especially if the land can't be grazed or you can't grow things on it. So I'm inclined, if we could get the information updated, both the forms that county council provided that said was incomplete, photographs that showed how the land is currently being used.
The receipts from the maintenance you did on the irrigation would be
Yes.
good too, to show that you've actively maintained those irrigation lines. And then I would be fine with a statement from the
So
Crandalls.
with that,
their
I would like
irrigation.
to, I'd rather disapprove it, but at the same time, I think we should probably continue this to make sure we have all the facts.
Yeah, I'm fine either way, but if you want to
Okay.
continue it, I'm.
So I'll make a motion then.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to continue this until the next BOE meeting. That's,
And the next BOE
BOE.
meeting would be when?
is that
October 30th.
September?
September 30th.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to continue this item until the September 30th BOE meeting.
September 30th, 2 p.m. here
Yeah, 2 p.m.
in
here in the
this,
commission
in this
chambers.
commission chambers. I can second that motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that passes 2-0. And with that, I think we've concluded today's Board of Equalization, unless there's some comments that need to be brought forth from the public.
Yeah, so can I'll make a motion to adjourn.
And first, were there any additional comments from the public, though? Okay.
All
Seeing
right.
none, then we'll conclude and we'll pass it. Pass 2-0. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Very much.